in the grand castle of Austrasia. In the year 575 AD, Queen Brunhild gazed upon her greatest treasures, 7 perfect babies, each born within 2 years of marriage to King Sigebert. The chroniclers wrote that she was the most devoted mother in all of Francia, but they only recorded what happened in daylight. But as summer turned to autumn, castle servants began whispering. Every evening at dusk, ravens would gather on the nursery windows. Not ordinary ravens, these birds were massive, their eyes glowing like embers in the fading light. And Queen Brunhild, she would speak to them in a language no one recognized. The wet nurses reported strange sounds from the royal nursery. Not crying, the babies never cried anymore. Instead, they heard cooing, low, guttural sounds that seemed to echo from too many throats. When brave servants peered through keyholes, they saw Queen Brunhild crouched over the cradles, making those same inhuman sounds back to her children. King Sigebert returned from his campaign against the Lombards to find his castle changed. The servants avoided the nursery wing. The dogs whimpered and refused to enter certain hallways. And his wife, his beloved Brunhild, would disappear for hours each night, returning to their bedchamber with black feathers caught in her golden hair. Sigebert found the first feather in their marriage bed, then another in his wine cup, then dozens scattered throughout the castle like black snow. When he questioned his wife, Queen Brunhild would only smile, a smile that no longer reached her eyes, and whisper, "The ravens know best how to care for babies, my lord." At the Feast of All Saints, Queen Brunhild failed to appear. For the first time in 7 years of marriage, she abandoned her royal duties. The nobles exchanged meaningful glances. They had heard the whispers from the servants' quarters, but what they didn't know was that high in the nursery tower, something far worse than whispers was taking place. Brother Columban, the castle chaplain, was the first to witness Queen Brunhild's midnight ritual. He had come to bless the babies before dawn prayers, but what he saw through the nursery door made him drop his holy water and flee. The queen was feeding her children, but not with milk. The good brother watched in paralyzed horror as Queen Brunhild fed strips of fresh meat to the ravens. But this was no ordinary flesh from the castle kitchens. The shapes, the size. Brother Columban recognized what no man should ever have to recognize. The queen was feeding her own children to the blackbirds, piece by piece. Brother Columban ran through the castle corridors, but the ravens were everywhere, watching from every alcove, every window, every shadow. They seemed to know he had witnessed their feeding. As he burst into King Sigebert's chamber, he gasped out the unspeakable truth. "Your Majesty!" "Your children." "They're gone." "Gone?" Sigebert whispered, his voice cracking like a boy's. "What do you mean, gone?" But even as he asked, he knew. The empty cradles he'd glimpsed, the blood under his wife's fingernails, the way she hummed lullabies to windows full of ravens, his 7 beautiful children, had become food for carrion birds. As dawn broke over Austrasia, the truth lay scattered across the courtyard stones. 7 sets of tiny bones bleached white by the raven's efficiency. King Sigebert stood at his window, counting each small skull, each delicate rib cage. 1, 2, 3, 7, all of his heirs. All of his love, reduced to fragments for scavenger birds. But Queen Brunhild felt no remorse. In her twisted mind, she had given her children the greatest gift, to fly forever with the ravens, to be free from the weakness of human flesh. She combed her golden hair and smiled at her reflection, whispering, "My babies are safe now. Safe in the sky where no one can hurt them." "Where are my children?" King Sigebert's voice echoed through the great hall like thunder. "Where are my 7 sons and daughters, Brunhild?" The queen tilted her head like a bird studying prey, her blue eyes reflecting no warmth, no recognition of his pain. "They are exactly where they belong, my lord. Free from the prison of flesh." "You never understood them as I did." Queen Brunhild continued, her voice taking on the cadence of someone reciting a prayer. "They cried at night, Sigebert. They wept because they knew they were trapped in these weak human bodies. I freed them. I gave them wings. I gave them the sky. Her smile widened, revealing teeth stained dark with dried blood. Brother Columban raised his crucifix and began the ancient words of exorcism. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. But Queen Brunhild threw back her head and laughed, a sound like ravens cawing in unison. "Your god has no power here, monk," she shrieked. "The old gods have returned, and they hunger for sacrifice." King Sigebert ordered a search of the castle's deepest foundations. What they found in the ancient cellars chilled even the bravest knights. Carved into stones older than Christianity were Celtic symbols, ravens devouring infants, mothers offering children to dark gods. This castle wasn't built on holy ground. It was built on a pagan sacrifice site. The hidden chamber revealed the horrible truth. Queen Brunhild hadn't invented this evil. She had inherited it. Generations of mothers had brought their children to this altar, feeding them to the raven god that demanded infant sacrifice. The bones formed patterns around the altar, circles within circles, like the flight patterns of feeding ravens. When they found Queen Brunhild in the ancient chamber, she was no longer trying to be human. Dressed in robes of raven feathers, she stood beneath the shaft that connected the sacrifice, altar to the castle's highest tower. "I am the Raven Mother," she declared, her voice now completely inhuman. "I have always been the Raven Mother, and my children wait for me in the sky." King Sigebert and his men pursued Queen Brunhild to the highest tower of the castle. There, silhouetted against the storm-dark sky, she stood on the very edge of the battlements. The ravens had come for her, thousands upon thousands, forming a living vortex of black wings around the tower. "Come down, Brunhild," the king shouted. "This madness ends now." Queen Brunhild turned to face her husband one last time. "I hear them calling, Sigebert," she said, her voice carried on the wind. "My children are calling for their mother. They want to show me how beautiful it is to fly." She smiled then, the first genuine smile she had worn since her transformation began. Tell the world that Queen Brunhild loved her children so much, she chose to join them in the sky, and then Queen Brunhild stepped into the void. For a heartbeat, she seemed to hang suspended in the air, supported by the wings of 10,000 ravens. King Sigebert's desperate cry echoed across the courtyard as he reached out to catch his beloved wife. But she was already beyond any earthly help. Embraced by the dark congregation she had served so faithfully. But when King Sigebert reached the courtyard, he found only empty feathers scattered on the stones. Queen Brunhild's body had vanished, taken by the ravens or transformed into something beyond human understanding. The sky was clear and blue once more, as if the dark congregation had never existed. Only the empty feathers remained as proof of what had transpired. In the weeks that followed, King Sigebert aged a decade. His hair turned white with grief, and he spent long hours in the chapel, lighting candles for his 7 lost children. Brother Columban recorded everything in the castle chronicles, though he wondered if future generations would believe such a tale. The ravens never returned to the castle. It was as if Queen Brunhild had taken them all with her to whatever realm she now inhabited. Today, the castle of Austrasia still stands in eastern France. The nursery tower remains empty, and local ravens still avoid the area, as if some ancestral memory warns them away. King Sigebert never remarried, never had other children. He ruled wisely but sadly until his death, always wondering if his beloved Brunhild had found the peace in the sky that had eluded her on earth. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, castle guards report hearing the sound of children laughing, carried on wings they cannot see. King Sigebert could not rest until he understood what had possessed his beloved wife. In the castle's ancient library, he and Brother Columban pored over centuries-old manuscripts, searching for any mention of similar occurrences. What they discovered in the chronicles of Saint Rembert would chill them to their very souls. The Chronicle of Saint Rembert, written in 421 AD, contained a chilling passage. In the time of the Raven Queen, mothers of noble blood were seized by unholy desires. They would take their infants to the high places and offer them to the black-winged, servants of the old gods. 7 generations this curse persisted, until the Christian kings drove out the ancient worship. The chronicles spoke of Queen Gisela of Burgundy, who in 425 AD had also fed her 7 children to ravens. Before her, Queen Theudechildis of the Franks in 398 AD, and before her, Queen Brunhild of Cologne in 371 AD, not King Sigebert's wife, but her namesake. The same name, the same number of children, the same horrific fate across 2 centuries. In the royal crypt beneath the chapel, they found the tombs of the previous Raven Queen. Each sarcophagus was marked with 7 small stones, 7 children sacrificed to the ancient gods. The Christian symbols carved over the tombs could not entirely hide the older Celtic spirals beneath, symbols of the raven goddess Badb, who demanded the blood of innocents. The ancient Celts worshipped Badb, the raven goddess of war and death. She demanded the ultimate sacrifice from her chosen servants, their own children, offered freely out of love, not force. The chosen mothers believed they were giving their babies eternal life, transforming them from mortal flesh into immortal spirits that would fly forever in Badb's dark host. Brother Columban found the bone amulet hidden in Queen Brunhild's personal effects, carved from an infant's rib and inscribed with raven symbols. It had been passed down from mother to daughter for generations. Each Raven Queen had worn it during her children's sacrifice, believing it would guide their souls to Badb's eternal flock. The curse passed from mother to daughter like a family heirloom. Queen Brunhild had received the bone amulet from her own mother, Queen Galswinter, who had whispered ancient lullabies about ravens and told stories of children who grew wings. Each generation believed they were preserving sacred knowledge, never understanding they were perpetuating an ancient evil. The tower from which Queen Brunhild leaped was not built for defense. It was built for sacrifice. The spiral staircase mimicked the flight pattern of ravens ascending to heaven. At its peak, hidden by centuries of weather, was a small altar where Celtic mothers had offered their children to Badb for over 1,000 years. In the royal treasury, they found the evidence of centuries of sacrifice, 49 bone amulets, arranged in groups of 7 generations of raven queens, each sacrificing 7 children to Badb's hunger. Over 300 babies had died to feed this ancient curse, their bones transformed into tokens of a mother's perverted love. The curse had spread across the known world through royal marriage alliances. Each time a daughter of a raven queen married into a new kingdom, she carried the bone amulet and the whispered stories with her. The pattern on King Sigebert's map formed a spiral, the same spiral the ravens flew when gathering for sacrifice. Brother Columban found the ritual instructions written by a Celtic druid in 298 AD. The raven mother must offer her children at the 7th moon of their 7th month. 7 cuts to prepare the flesh, 7 prayers to guide the souls, 7 ravens to carry them home. Only then will Badb accept the sacrifice and grant the mother her wings. The sacred grove of Badby stood in the heart of the ancient forest, where Celtic druids had performed the ritual of the 7 ravens for over a millennium. The original stone altar still stood there, according to the chronicles, stained black with the blood of countless offerings. It was here that the first Raven Queen had received her calling. King Sigebert realized the curse was still spreading. Even now, other noble families might be harboring daughters who carried the bone amulets and whispered the ancient lullabies. If he could not save his own children, perhaps he could save others. The king began planning a campaign not against mortal enemies, but against an ancient evil. King Sigebert issued a royal decree throughout his kingdom. All noble families were to be investigated for signs of raven worship. Any bone amulets were to be confiscated and destroyed any ancient Celtic texts burned. The king would use the full power of Christian law to break a curse that predated Christianity by centuries. The royal messengers rode out at dawn, carrying the king's decree to every corner of the realm. They bore not just the authority of the crown, but the blessing of the church. For the first time in centuries, the curse of the Raven Queens would face organized resistance from those who knew its true nature. In castles across Francia, other noble wives read King Sigebert's decree with growing unease. Lady Clotilde of Soissons recognized the description of the bone amulet her grandmother had given her. Countess Fredegund of Tours remembered the lullabies about flying children her mother had sung. The curse was wider spread than anyone had imagined. The investigations began in earnest. In castle after castle, royal agents found evidence of the curse, bone amulets hidden in jewelry boxes, Celtic symbols carved into nursery walls, ancient lullabies passed down through generations. Some noble families surrendered the artifacts willingly, grateful to be freed from a burden they had never understood. Under the blessing of Bishop Nicetius, the collected bone amulets were burned in sacred fire outside the Cathedral of Trier. As the flames consumed the ancient artifacts, witnesses reported hearing sounds like infant cries, carried on the wind, the souls of sacrificed children finally being released from their bondage to serve the Raven Goddess. After 2 years of investigation and purification, King Sigebert received official recognition from Pope John III in Constantinople. The Church declared the ancient curse of the Raven Queens officially broken, and King Sigebert was praised as a defender of Christian children against pagan evil. The cost of victory, however, had been his own happiness. Across the kingdom, mothers who might have become Raven Queens were saved from the ancient curse. Children who would have been sacrificed to Badby grew up to live full lives, marry and have children of their own. The bloodline of sacrifice was finally broken after 7 centuries of horror. The ancient sacred grove of Badby was found and consecrated by Christian priests. The altar where countless children had been sacrificed was broken apart, its stones scattered and blessed. Where ravens once gathered to feast on innocent flesh, wildflowers now bloomed in testimony to the triumph of love over ancient evil. King Sigebert never remarried, never had other children to replace those he had lost. But in his later years, he found peace in knowing that his sacrifice had saved countless other families from the curse that had destroyed his own. His 7 children had not died in vain. Their death had led to the salvation of hundreds of others. Modern archaeological excavations at the site of King Sigebert's castle have confirmed the historical accounts. No bone amulets have been found among the medieval artifacts, and ancient Celtic symbols show evidence of deliberate Christian destruction. The king's campaign against the curse appears to have been completely successful. Today, the castles where Raven Queens once ruled are peaceful ruins or thriving communities. The curse of Badby was broken so completely that even the local ravens have forgotten their ancient allegiance. Children play where once their ancestors were sacrificed, and mothers sing lullabies of love and protection instead of ancient calls to dark gods. King Sigebert's victory over evil continues to protect the innocent. 7 centuries after his own children paid the ultimate price for their mother's madness. In the deepest vaults of the Vatican, Pope John III examined the evidence that King Sigebert's messenger had brought. The bone amulet was not unique. The Church had been quietly collecting such artifacts for decades. Your king has stumbled upon something far older and more dangerous than he realizes, the Pope whispered. The curse of the Raven Queens reaches back to the very dawn of Christianity. The papal map revealed the terrifying truth. The curse had spread far beyond Francia, from the Celtic strongholds of Ireland and Wales to the Germanic forests, from the Nordic fjords to the Mediterranean islands. Raven Queens had been sacrificing their children for over 8 centuries. King Sigebert's kingdom was just one small part of a continent-wide horror. The Church's secret archives contained evidence that the curse was far older than anyone suspected. Roman patrician women had worn similar bone amulets during gladiatorial games, believing the deaths in the arena would feed their raven goddess. The curse had adapted and survived through the fall of Rome. The barbarian invasions and the rise of Christianity itself, Pope John III dispatched his most trusted agents across Europe on a secret mission. They were to locate and eliminate the remaining Raven Queens before they could claim more innocent lives. But these papal warriors soon discovered they were not hunting mere mortal women. They were battling servants of something far more ancient and powerful. In the Highlands of Scotland, papal agent Brother Matthias found Lady Morag MacLeod, who had been feeding children to ravens for 30 years. Unlike Queen Brunhild, who had sacrificed her own offspring, Lady Morag had been taking peasant children, dozens of them, from villages. Too frightened to report the disappearances, she wore 7 bone amulets, one for each decade of service to Bab. Lady Morag's nursery contained evidence of unimaginable horror. 21 cradles, each holding the skull of a child she had stolen and sacrificed. The tally marks on the walls numbered in the hundreds. She had been feeding Badby's hunger for 3 decades, taking children from across the Highlands until entire villages had been emptied of their young. Brother Matthias began the ritual of exorcism, but Lady Morag's power far exceeded Queen Brunhild's. She rose into the air, supported by invisible wings, while the ravens spoke the names of her victims in perfect Gaelic. Alistair, Fiona, Hamish. The litany of the dead continued for an hour, each name a child whose soul was bound to Badby's service. At the monastery of Glendalough in Ireland, monks worked day and night to compile intelligence, reports from papal agents across Europe. The picture that emerged was terrifying. Over 40 active raven queens, each commanding flocks of supernatural ravens, each claiming children to feed an ancient goddess, who grew stronger with every sacrifice. Pope John III declared a secret holy war against the servants of Badby, and this was not a crusade against mortal enemies, but a battle for the souls of Europe's children. Papal agents were armed with blessed weapons and ancient rituals, trained to fight enemies that could command flocks of supernatural ravens and possessed powers beyond human understanding. At Castell Colk in Wales, papal knights faced their first battle against a fully empowered raven queen. Lady Gwenlliant commanded her ravens like a military force. They attacked in formations, used flanking maneuvers, and even employed siege tactics. The battle lasted 3 days, and when it ended, the papal forces had learned they were fighting an enemy that combined supernatural power with military genius. In Lady Gwenlliant's private chambers, the papal agents found her most disturbing secret. She had commissioned portraits of every child she had sacrificed, arranging them like a family gallery. Each painting showed a different face, a different life cut short. She had loved each victim in her twisted way, believing she was giving them the gift of eternal flight. With her raven goddess, the surviving raven queens gathered in the ancient stone circle of Schwarzwald, uniting their power for the first time in centuries. 7 queens from 7 kingdoms, each commanding hundreds of supernatural ravens, came together to perform a ritual that would strengthen Badby's hold on the mortal world. The very earth trembled at their combined invocation. King Sigebert received an urgent message from Pope John III. Your victory against Queen Brunhild has prompted the remaining raven queens to unite. They seek to resurrect Bab herself in physical form. If they succeed, no child in Europe will be safe. We need your help to stop them before they complete their ritual. In a secret forest meeting, the crowned heads of Europe formed an unprecedented alliance. King Ethelbert of Kent brought evidence of ravens stealing children from English villages. Duke Tassilo of Bavaria reported similar incidents along the Rhine. Count Raymond of Toulouse had found bone amulets in his own castle's foundations. The curse had infected the entire continent. The ritual of the 7 raven queens reached its crescendo as midnight struck across the Black Forest. The air above the stone circle tore open like fabric, revealing the shadow realm where Badby had waited for centuries. The ancient goddess began to take physical form, her massive raven wings spreading across the sky like storm clouds, ready to reclaim the mortal world. King Sigebert led the combined armies of Christian Europe in a charge against the supernatural forces gathered in the Black Forest. Every weapon had been blessed, every horse shod with iron from church bells, every knight protected by relics of saints. This was the largest supernatural battle in European history, Christianity's final stand against the ancient pagan gods. The Battle of Schwarzwald was unlike any conflict in human history. Knights fought ravens that fought with human intelligence, while raven queens wielded supernatural powers against holy warriors protected by divine grace. King Sigebert's sword, blessed with water from the Jordan River, blazed with holy fire as he duelled Lady Morag above the battlefield. Brother Columban reached the ancient altar, just as Badby's manifestation reached its peak. As he placed his crucifix upon the pagan stone, divine light exploded across the battlefield. The goddess's form began to waver and fade, her connection to the mortal world severed by the power of the cross. The Raven Queens felt their supernatural strength draining away like water. With Badby's manifestation destroyed, the 7 Raven Queens collapsed around the broken altar. Their supernatural powers were gone, leaving behind ordinary, mortal women who seemed to wake from a centuries-long nightmare. Many wept as they remembered what they had done under the goddess's influence, their humanity restored along with their horror at their own actions. The former Raven Queens entered convents across Europe, spending their remaining years in penance and service. Lady Morag founded an orphanage in Scotland for children who had lost their parents. The Welsh Queen Gwenlliant became a healer, using her knowledge of herbs to save lives instead of taking them. Each sought to balance the scales of their past evil with present good. The stone circle where Badby had nearly manifested became one of Europe's most sacred Christian shrines. The Chapel of the Holy Innocents was built on the exact spot where the pagan altar had stood, and pilgrims came from across the continent to pray for the protection of children. Many reported miraculous healings, as if the site itself had been purified by divine grace. King Sigebert was hailed as the savior of Europe's children. In the great halls of every Christian kingdom hung portraits of the children who had been saved by his actions. Not just his own 7 who died, but the thousands who lived because the curse was broken. His personal tragedy had become the foundation for continental salvation. The victory over the Raven Queens transformed European folklore forever. Where once mothers had sung ancient lullabies about ravens taking children to the sky, new songs emerged about ravens protecting children, building nests for their own young, and living in harmony with human families. The birds themselves seemed to sense this change, becoming more trusting and gentle around human settlements. Today, ravens fly over European cities as they have for millennia, but the supernatural terror they once represented is completely forgotten. Children delight in watching them. Families point them out in parks, and scientists study their remarkable intelligence. The curse of the Raven Queen was so thoroughly broken that even the memory of their evil has faded into legend. King Sigebert's sacrifice ensured that motherhood would be forever associated with protection and love, never again with the ancient hunger of forgotten gods. 3 months after the great victory, King Sigebert experienced something that would change his understanding of the curse forever. While praying before his children's memorial candles, the flames began to move in impossible ways, forming tiny figures that seemed to dance and reach toward him. His heart recognized what his mind could barely accept. His 7 children were still conscious somewhere, trapped between life and death. Brother Columban delved into the church's most forbidden texts, seeking answers about the fate of souls sacrificed to pagan gods. What he discovered in the writings of St. Patrick chilled him to the bone. children sacrificed to Badby, were not released into heaven or hell, but bound to serve the raven goddess in a supernatural realm between worlds, conscious and suffering for eternity. In his vision, Brother Columban saw the realm where Bab held her captive souls, a twilight sky where thousands of children flew on raven wings, forever circling the goddess's bone throne. They retained their human consciousness, but were trapped in forms that served their captor's will. Among them, he recognized the faces of King Sigebert's 7 children, still innocent, still longing for their father's love. In the sacred grove of Brocéliande, they found the last free druid of the old religion, Merlin, called the Wild Man of the Woods. For 3 centuries, he had hidden from Badby's servants, preserving the knowledge needed to enter the other world. "A path exists," he told them, "but mortals who walk it rarely return. The goddess guards her prisoners well, and the journey transforms all who attempt it." Merlin performed the ancient ritual of soul walking, allowing King Sigebert's spirit to travel to the other world, while his body remained protected in the sacred circle. Brother Columban chanted prayers of protection as the king's soul rose, like morning mist, accompanied by ravens of pure light, angels in raven form, sent by divine grace to guide him through the supernatural realm. King Sigebert's soul entered a realm beyond mortal comprehension, a sky without ground, where islands of bone floated in storm-dark clouds. The air itself pulsed with supernatural energy, and the sound of 10,000 raven wings created a constant, mournful symphony. Far ahead, he could see the spiraling host of child souls, including his own 7 children, trapped in eternal servitude to their dark goddess. When King Sigebert's soul appeared in the other world, his 7 children immediately broke from their endless spiral and rushed to surround him. Though they had raven wings and their voices could only make bird cries, their eyes still held all the love and recognition of the babies he had lost. They tried desperately to communicate, their small hands reaching for a father they could see but not touch. Badby sensed the intrusion immediately. Rising from her throne of infant bones, the ancient goddess revealed her true form, beautiful and terrible beyond mortal comprehension. Her voice shook the other world as she spoke. "Sigebert of Austrasia, you who broke my earthly power, dare you now invade my eternal realm? Your children's souls are mine by right of sacrifice. Leave now or join them in eternal servitude." King Sigebert stood firm before the goddess's cosmic wrath, holding high the crucifix that had broken her earthly power. Divine light blazed from the holy symbol, creating a sphere of protection that even Badby could not penetrate. "These children were given to you through deception and madness," he declared. "I claim them back in the name of true love, the love that sacrifices self for others, not others for self." The power of divine love began to crack the foundations of Badby's realm. Where King Sigebert's cross blazed brightest, the other world itself began to fracture, revealing glimpses of true heaven beyond the artificial prison. The enslaved children felt their raven forms beginning to fade as the goddess's binding spell weakened under the assault of selfless, paternal love. As divine light spread through the other world, more children appeared, not just King Sigebert's 7, but hundreds of victims from across the centuries, Celtic children from the dawn of the curse, Roman children from patrician sacrifices, Saxon and Norman children from generations of raven queens. The king's mission had expanded. He would save not just his own, but every innocent soul Badby had enslaved. Badby summoned every particle of her ancient power, spreading her wings across the entire otherworld in a desperate attempt to hold her prisoners. Dark energy swirled around her like a cosmic storm, but it was too late. The pure love of a father for his children, backed by divine grace, had created cracks in her very essence. The ancient goddess was not destroyed, but her power over innocent souls was broken forever. In that moment of divine triumph, Every child's raven wings dissolved like morning mist. They became fully human again. Not the torn flesh they had been when sacrificed, but perfect spiritual forms ready for heaven. King Sigebert's 7 children embraced their father's soul with tears of joy, while hundreds of other liberated souls began their ascent toward the golden light of paradise. Angels of pure light descended to guide the freed souls toward heaven. King Sigebert found himself floating upward with his 7 children, part of a glorious procession of hundreds of innocent victims finally released from their supernatural bondage. Below them, Badby's realm collapsed into empty shadow, not destroyed, for ancient gods cannot truly die, but emptied of the innocent souls that had been her power source. At the threshold of heaven, King Sigebert faced the ultimate choice. He could enter paradise with his children and find eternal peace, or return to his earthly body to continue serving his kingdom. His children, now speaking with the wisdom of souls touched by divine grace, made the choice for him. Father, your work is not finished. You must return and teach others that love conquers even death. The farewell between King Sigebert and his children was filled with joy rather than sorrow. They had been transformed into beings of pure light, beautiful beyond any earthly description. As they ascended toward heaven, they called out blessings upon their father. Tell the world that love is stronger than any ancient curse, and that no sacrifice of innocence is ever truly lost. Their words became light that filled his soul with unshakable peace. King Sigebert's soul returned to his earthly body as dawn broke over the sacred circle. For a moment, divine light blazed from his form, and both Merlin and Brother Columban saw wings of pure light spread from his shoulders before fading away. The king opened his eyes with a smile of absolute peace. He had walked in paradise and carried its blessing back to the mortal world. King Sigebert shared his otherworld journey with his entire kingdom, holding nothing back. He described the realm where innocent souls had been imprisoned, the confrontation with ancient evil, and the power of love to overcome even supernatural bondage. His words were recorded by Brother Columban and spread throughout Europe, bringing hope to parents who had lost children to the darkness. Word of the Great Liberation spread across Europe, bringing comfort to thousands of grieving parents. They lit candles with new understanding. Their lost children were not trapped in supernatural bondage, but had been freed to find peace in heaven. Churches added special prayers for the liberation of innocent souls, and the story became one of Christianity's greatest testimonies to the power of love over ancient evil. The liberation of the innocent souls had an unexpected effect. Ravens throughout Europe began to behave differently. No longer carrying the spiritual corruption of their association with Badby, they became protectors of children rather than predators. Parents reported ravens guiding lost children home, building nests near churches, and even seeming to watch over playgrounds with benevolent intelligence. In his later years, King Sigebert was revered throughout Europe as a living saint, though he never sought official canonization. He dedicated his life to protecting orphaned and abandoned children, creating sanctuaries where they could grow up safely. 7 white roses bloomed perpetually in his garden, one for each of his children in heaven, and ravens roosted peacefully in the trees above, as if blessing his work. Monks across Europe worked to preserve King Sigebert's story in illuminated manuscripts of extraordinary beauty. These books, decorated with gold leaf and precious pigments, depicted the battle against the Raven Queens and the liberation of innocent souls. They would serve as eternal testimony that no evil, no matter how ancient or powerful, could ultimately triumph over the sacrificial love of a parent for their children. King Sigebert's victory achieved something unprecedented in human history, the complete transformation of an ancient symbol of evil into one of protection and peace. In the centuries that followed, ravens became beloved throughout Europe, seen as guardians of children rather than harbingers of doom. The curse was so thoroughly broken that even the species itself was redeemed. When King Sigebert's earthly work was finally complete, he was welcomed into heaven by his 7 children, not as the babies they had been when sacrificed, but as the adults they would have become perfected and radiant with divine love. Around them played hundreds of other children, every innocent soul that had ever been freed from supernatural bondage through his courage. In paradise, every sacrifice made for love is eternally rewarded, and every act of selfless courage echoes through eternity. 50 years after King Sigebert's death, the Abbey of Saint-Denis began compiling the definitive Chronicle of the Raven Queen Wars. Brother Anselm, who had known the king personally, supervised the collection of over 200 testimonies from survivors, papal agents, and witnesses. These manuscripts would preserve not just the facts, but the profound spiritual truth that love can triumph over even the most ancient evil. The defeat of the Raven Queens triggered a continent-wide cultural transformation. Church artists across Europe began depicting ravens not as harbingers of doom, but as symbols of divine protection. Maternal imagery shifted from the terrible Celtic goddesses demanding sacrifice to Christian mothers blessing and protecting their children. An entire civilization's understanding of motherhood was purified by one king's sacrificial love. By the 12th century, the University of Paris included the Raven Queen Wars in its curriculum as both historical fact and theological instruction. Students studied the preserved testimonies and examined the few bone amulets, kept as evidence of humanity's darkest spiritual errors. The story became a cornerstone of medieval education about the triumph of Christian love over pagan darkness. 20th century archaeological excavations have remarkably confirmed the medieval chronicles. At castle sites mentioned in the Raven Queen accounts, archaeologists found Celtic symbols deliberately carved over with Christian imagery, empty chambers that once housed collections of bone artifacts, and clear evidence of pagan sacred sites being converted to Christian use exactly as the chronicles described. Modern ornithological research has revealed something extraordinary about European ravens. Their behavior toward humans, particularly children, is markedly different from ravens in other parts of the world. European ravens show higher intelligence, greater empathy, and an unusual protective instinct around human children. Scientists date this behavioral divergence to approximately the 8th century, exactly when the chronicles record the defeat of the Raven Queens. Today, families visit the castles where Raven Queens once ruled as tourist attractions. Children play safely in courtyards, where their ancestors' bones once littered the ground. The ravens that nest in these ancient walls are gentle and curious, often accepting food from visitors' hands. Transformation is so complete that most tourists have no idea. They stand where one of history's greatest spiritual battles was fought and won. Modern child psychologists have identified the defeat of the Raven Queens as a crucial turning point in European family dynamics. The transformation of maternal imagery from sacrificial to protective corresponded with measurable decreases in infanticide, child abandonment, and maternal depression. King Sigebert's personal victory over ancient evil created cultural changes that protected children for over a millennium. Many European cities now hold annual festivals celebrating the liberation of innocent souls and the transformation of raven symbolism. Children wear colorful wings and learn about the historical King Sigebert who proved that love conquers all forms of evil. These celebrations turn a dark chapter of history into a joyous affirmation of parental love and child protection. The Vatican's secret archives still contain the original documents from Pope John III's campaign against the Raven Queens. These papers, preserved for over 200 years, provide official ecclesiastical confirmation that the Church recognized and actively fought supernatural threats to Christian families. The archives contain detailed tactical plans for spiritual warfare that seem almost impossible to modern minds. Genetic studies of medieval European remains have revealed something startling. Populations in areas once terrorized by raven queens show distinct genetic markers associated with enhanced parental protective instincts and child survival traits, the supernatural predation may have inadvertently strengthened the genetic foundations of protective parenthood in European bloodlines. Modern child psychologists use King Sigebert's story as a therapeutic tool for children who have experienced trauma or abandonment, the narrative of a father's love being strong, enough to rescue children from any darkness. Even supernatural bondage provides hope and healing that transcends the centuries. Ancient victory continues to heal modern wounds. Art restoration projects across Europe continue to reveal medieval frescoes and paintings depicting the Raven Queen, wars with startling theological accuracy. These artworks, painted by artists who lived closer to the events, show angels fighting alongside human warriors and children's souls being literally liberated from supernatural bondage. The medieval mind understood spiritual realities that modern skepticism often dismisses. King Sigebert's choices continue to challenge ethics students across Europe. His decision to sacrifice his own eternal happiness with his children in order to return and protect other families raises profound questions about parental duty, personal sacrifice, and moral heroism. The medieval king's choices provide case studies for modern ethical philosophy. European raven populations continue to display behavior that sets them apart from ravens. Worldwide, an almost mystical dedication to protecting human children. Wildlife researchers document cases of ravens alerting adults to children in danger, guiding lost children home, and even defending children from other predators. It's as if the species itself was transformed by their liberation from supernatural corruption. Perhaps the most remarkable evidence of the raven's transformation is their use in modern animal therapy programs. European ravens display an uncanny ability to comfort traumatized children, showing gentleness and empathy that amazes medical professionals. Birds that were once harbingers of death have become healers of childhood pain, a transformation that seems to echo across the centuries from King Sigebert's victory. Major European museums now include extensive exhibits about the Raven Queen Wars, presenting them as historically documented examples of spiritual warfare. These displays educate visitors about how supernatural evil once threatened European civilization and was defeated through sacrificial love. The story has become part of Europe's official cultural heritage. UNESCO designated King Sigebert's castle site as a World Heritage location, recognizing its crucial role in European spiritual development. Annual ceremonies commemorate not just the king's victory, but all the innocent souls whose sacrifice ultimately led to their own liberation and the protection of countless future children. The ravens that attend these ceremonies seem to understand their significance. Modern Europeans increasingly discover their personal connections to the Raven Queen era through genealogical research. Many find ancestors who survived the supernatural predation, while others trace their lineage to families that were directly protected by King Sigebert's reforms. The ancient battle for innocent souls becomes deeply personal when viewed through the lens of family history. Modern seminaries include the Raven Queen Wars in their curriculum as a masterclass in spiritual warfare. Future priests study how medieval church leaders successfully identified, confronted, and defeated supernatural threats to Christian families. The ancient battle provides practical instruction for modern spiritual challenges that traditional seminary training might not address. The transformation of raven symbolism in European culture represents one of history's most complete reversals of meaning. Ravens now appear in wedding ceremonies as symbols of fidelity, in nurseries as gentle protectors, and in children's stories as wise guides. A symbol that once represented supernatural terror now embodies protection, intelligence, and faithful love. Scientific analysis of soil samples from former Raven Queen battle sites reveals unusual mineral compositions that significantly enhance plant growth and agricultural productivity. Farmers in these areas report unusually healthy crops and livestock, as if the ground itself retains some blessing from the spiritual victory achieved there over a millennium ago. Science documents what faith proclaimed, that good triumphing over evil leaves lasting positive effects. The European Parliament unanimously passed the Children's Protection Heritage Act, officially recognizing King Sigebert's victory as foundational to European child welfare. The act mandates that schools across the continent teach his story as an example of how parental love and moral courage can overcome any threat to innocent life. Ancient victory becomes modern law. Today, King Sigebert's victory protects millions of European children who will never know how close their ancestors came to supernatural horror. Ravens fly naturally across skies where they once gathered for unholy feasts, and children play safely in places where ancient evil once held dominion. The king's sacrifice echoes through every generation, a shield of love protecting the innocent across the centuries. In the eternal realm, King Sigebert stands surrounded not only by his own 7 children, but by every innocent soul whose protection was secured by his courage. Together they form a celestial host that watches over Europe still, a constellation of love that shines in the spiritual realm, above every place where children laugh and play in safety. His victory over the Raven Queens was not just historical, it was eternal, proving that when love fights evil, love always wins. And in that truth, every parent finds hope, every child finds protection, and every generation discovers that the greatest magic in the universe is the sacrificial love that gives everything to save the innocent.